Well, here we are, week 5. So what have we done so far? We've gotten a pretty good foundation in adult learning theory. We've looked at approaches to adult ESL, including program design and classroom construction. We've looked at context and the importance for that as the foundation for all lessons. Last week, you looked at strategies and approaches for developing the fluency skills of listening and speaking, and we started there because that's how we learn language. We first listen, we then learn to speak it. And after those fluency skills, then we begin to learn the literacy skills of reading and writing. And that's where we are this week, developing reading and writing skills. Now, when we talk about literacy, there are different types of literacy, and these are all important in an adult ESL class. Obviously, document literacy, being able to read the printed word, being able to write effectively in English. But there's also numeracy literacy, and this means more than being able to read and say the numbers in English. This also means being able to demonstrate basic math computations, because that is a work skill. So giving students, for example, the opportunity to split a restaurant tab in a role play demonstrates their ability to divide, or having students in a shopping activity multiply the cost. If I buy 1 apple, how much will it be if I buy 5, for example? Giving them the opportunity to demonstrate basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division really helps them develop workplace skills. There's technology literacy. Computers, being able to use a mouse, being able to use a swipe screen, being able to use a mobile device, to use the internet and do some research. And finally, consumer literacy, and this is really important. ESL learners here need to learn how to protect themselves from the many, many scams that immigrants are facing. The IRS scam is just one of them. There's an immigration scam where they get a phone call saying you are going to be deported, and to stop those deportation proceedings immediately, you need to give me your social security number, or you need to give me your bank account number. There's another one that I even get, but immigrants don't know how to negotiate this if their English is not very good. This phone call says, this is the sheriff's department and we have a warrant out for your arrest, and you need to call this number and you need to give us a bank card number right away or we're going to arrest you. So these are all important different types of literacy that you would be teaching in an adult ESL class. Now, in a minute, I'm going to ask you 2 times to pause the video and to think and to write. But first, let's look at the development of reading. How did we learn to read? Well, we started with being able to recognize the letters and attach them to a sound, and to recognize words and eventually sentences, paragraphs, etc. We had to have a pretty good vocabulary, and as we got better at reading, our vocabulary grew as well. Being able to recognize sight words. Now, sight words are high frequency words, and generally, for the most part, they do not sound the way they are spelled. For example, the word enough, or the word sight, the word knowledge, the word the. Those words do not sound the way they are spelled. Those are sight words. And being able to grow comprehension and the ability to speak the language out loud through silent reading and oral reading. Silent reading is where comprehension happens. If you have students engaged in silent reading and you hear a student speaking the words out loud, even if it's at a whisper, train that student to stop doing that, because that is not how comprehension is built. Comprehension is built by our brains doing that speaking for us. But the oral reading is also really important because this is where students get practice with pronunciation, with rhythm and intonation, being able to chunk phrases. being able to read with expression, and that means being able to read the punctuation, pausing at a comma, stopping at a period, giving the right inflection if it's a question, giving the right inflection if there's an exclamation point. And then there are different types of reading and different purposes for reading. So here's where I'm going to ask you to pause the video to stop, think, and write. Write two lists for this one. First, think of the many types of reading you do. Make a list of the different types of reading. And then think of the different purposes you have for reading. Make a list of the different purposes for reading. And when you have your list, go ahead and continue the video. Does your list look similar to this, exactly like this? Maybe you have a few more elements. Maybe you don't have quite this many, but that's okay. These are the basic ones. Types of reading: informational texts, newspapers, magazines, product instructions, fictional texts like novels and graphic novels, poetry, legal reading like contracts and wills, and then academic reading. What about purposes for reading? Does your list look at all like this? Again, we read for information like news and instructions. We read for enjoyment, and the more adult ESL students read for enjoyment with level appropriate books, the faster their English will grow. Being able to read warnings and directions like signs and notices at work, and then certainly reading for the academic knowledge. Let's look at what goes into writing. How did you begin to learn how to write? How did you get good at it? Well, you started with learning how to form the letters, certainly, and then being able to put those letters into words and the words into sentences and the sentences into paragraphs, and that becomes the mechanics of writing, which include the spelling, the grammar, the punctuation, and syntax, or word order. Word choice and richness of expression, right? That growth of vocabulary is so important. Clarity of expression, being able to write without creating confusion. And then, is it for non-academic or is it for academic writing? Again, writing for different purposes. So again, let's keep in mind, academic writing is what ESL adult students really need to work on. But again, stop the video and think and write. Make a list of the different purposes for writing that you can think of. Does your list look like this? Certainly informational writing like our shopping lists, work-related writing like reports and requests, personal writing, letters and birthday cards, or official correspondences like a note to a child's teacher. There's academic writing, of course, and creative writing. The elements of reading and writing that you would be likely teaching in an adult ESL class can include some or all of these. You may be teaching left to right orientation. If a student reads Arabic or Mandarin Chinese but does not read any English, that student probably doesn't have much experience reading left to right. So that's something you might have to explicitly teach them. Teaching them how to form the letters efficiently, forming words, sentences, paragraphs, essays, papers, books. And then the elements of reading that are the three coding words. Recoding is reading, word recognition, not just being able to recognize it, but to say it. So recoding is recognizing it. Decoding it is being able to remember the meaning of the word. And then encoding is remembering how to spell the word. All of that and comprehend too. No wonder our brains get tired. The building blocks of the fluency and literacy skills are phonemes and graphemes. Phonemes are the smallest distinctive units of sound in the spoken language. Notice I didn't say letters because the sound of S is a phoneme, but the sound of SH, sh, That's also a phoneme. The graphemes, again, I'm not saying letters, these are the smallest meaningful contrastive units in the written system. So S is a letter, but SH is a grapheme because it's a contrastive unit. It has a specific sound associated with it, and that is a grapheme. You're going to be learning about top-down versus bottom-up literacy strategies this week, and I've got 3 special videos just for you. But what are they basically? Well, top-down is where the whole language approach came from. This builds on your world knowledge. The bottom-up strategies, or the phonics approach, build on your knowledge of the language. I'm going to look at 2 different resources right now, our Parrish book, and also this other book, English L2 Reading, Getting to the Bottom by Barbara Birch. Parrish says, you're going to read this week, she says, whole language, or the top-down approach, provides meaningful and relevant material, but she also explains that it doesn't provide the basic building blocks of reading, which basically by that she means that letter to sound knowledge. But when it comes to phonics, the bottom-up approach, phonics does not encourage readers to make meaning of what they are reading or to use contextual clues, predicting, or other top-down holistic practices that are all used by efficient readers. So if you focus too much on one of these strategies, the student is going to be deficient in the other strategy and is not going to be an efficient reader. What does Barbara Birch say about it? Pretty much the same thing. She just words it differently. So if you focus too much on the phonics, that bottom-up approach, you're putting too much emphasis on understanding the letters and the sounds that those letters should make, and the students aren't getting meaning from the text. And she says this is going to leave them with a poor priority of strategies. But if you focus too much on the top-down, asking them to get meaning from the text by getting meaning from context or inferring meaning, they don't get those basic building blocks that Betsy described in the previous slide. And again, we're leaving the students with a poor priority of strategies. Well, do we need a referee? Which one do we do? Which one do we do first? Which one, how do we do this? Which method is best? Well, in fact, efficient readers use both top-down and bottom-up processing at the same time. We need to find balance. And so it's really good for you to assess how students are at their reading and writing so that you can hone in on giving them the bottom-up strategies that they need. If it's an advanced class and their ability to read the words is great, but they're not getting meaning from the strategy, from the reading, then you've got to work on their top-down strategies. Here's what it looks like. When we read anything, 2 things are going on. We've got brain processing strategies happening, and we're drawing on our knowledge base from our memories. So the top-down strategies use the cognitive processing of inferring, predicting, problem solving, and constructing meaning. And it's drawing upon our world knowledge, things that we know, our experiences. The bottom-up strategy, well, let me draw the arrow. Okay, now the bottom-up strategies. These are going to draw on our knowledge of the language, being able to recognize the letters, recognize the words, get meaning from the word, and chunking the words into phrases. So again, those are those basic building blocks. So if you need to move students from the bottom to the top, and most beginning students really need to work on their bottom-up strategies, you begin with the auditory perception, being able to discriminate the sounds, being able to hear the sound and discriminate that sound in a word. Then being able to link the sound to the symbol, the grapheme to phoneme linkage. Being able to visually discriminate letters and words. Being able to write letters and words. And then finally, being able to read words, phrases, sentences, paragraphs, you name it. So for your toolkit this week, I have 3 videos that you can download and save to your computer along with these charts that go with them. These are 3 strategies for building bottom-up literacy strategies. Now the charts are designed, you would think we'd start at the bottom and move up, but first we're going to start at the top of the list and go down. But the top of the list is the bottom-most skill. So if I'm working on consonant names and sound extension lessons, I'm going to begin with auditory perception. And here are some examples of auditory perception activities. Then we'll work on auditory discrimination and visual letter recognition with meaningful letter sound linkages, and finally writing and reading in meaningful contexts. The second video is words in pattern and vowel sound extension lessons. And again, we're going to start with the bottommost skill, which is the auditory perception, moving up to meaningful letter sound linkages, meaningful sound to word linkages, writing and reading in meaningful contexts, and then transfer. This is a high cognitive function, being able to transfer that and create a sentence. Finally, the third video is sight word extension lessons. Remember, sight words are those high frequency words that are often not spelled the way they sound. We begin at the bottom with visual recognition of the word, being able to read the word in context, being able to recognize that word in a field of other words that might look similar to it, and then being able to read and write the word. So those 3 videos are for you this week. Now, some other things to think about are ways to reinforce students doing independent study and practice. And one way you can do that is with vocabulary cards. You can teach them to organize their notebooks, especially with left to right orientation, so that maybe you're putting the most current lesson at the back so that they're always using that left-right orientation. And ways to help them do this are sticky tabs, dividers, flags. And the other thing that I just mentioned are the vocabulary cards, especially for sight words. A single word on a single card, you punch them, students put them together with a little ring, and they take them home and they practice them at home. And there are samples of vocabulary cards in the Want to Know More section this week. So you can download and save those templates. This week you're going to learn about the language experience approach, and you're going to watch a video about it. And then you're going to discuss the language experience approach. What do you think of it? So this week you've got Chapter 5. You've got 2 videos on the language experience approach, the 3 videos of the bottom-up literacy strategies, 1 article about handwriting and the importance of it, and then discuss language experience approach and your reflective journal. Looking ahead, next week we'll look at brain-based teaching and learning. Our next face-to-face class is the 12th, and then you have an icebreaker demo to do in class on October 26th. So these are the resources for this week that I've used. And with that, I will come back into the picture and say, I know this is kind of a long video, but remember that you had time to pause it and do a little thinking and writing. So I look forward to seeing you in the discussions, and I'll see you in class on the 12th. Bye-bye.